We're going off the normal format for this show. I know the last bunch of episodes have been really interesting, but they've been really heavy topics, and I just want to have fun for a change, you know, do something lighthearted. And I've been getting into doing challenges lately, so this week is a challenge week. My challenge this week is to review a computer RPG, and that got me thinking. You see, before I had this, before I even had this, or before I even had this or this, all we had was this. Alright, so that opening's probably got a bunch of you guys scratching your heads right now, because when you're thinking of RPGs, you're probably thinking of Zelda or Diablo or Mass Effect. But this challenge really made me think, well, what is an RPG? And you can't really talk about the new stuff without at least giving a tip of the hat to the old school.
Use your lightning bolt.
To me, a role-playing game is something you do with dice, paper, pencils, Mountain Dew, and Doritos on a weekend night in the basement with a room full of friends. These days, I understand that it's more meaning a storytelling computer game. An RPG has character growth, dialogue, missions, and most importantly, an ending. Well, at least most computer RPGs have an ending. But everything has an origin, so I wanted to go back and explore where that came from. The search led me into 2 games, but ultimately only one seemed like the true origin for console RPGs.
So this is why I'm reviewing an 8-bit game, sort of an origin of the species, if you will. Now, I could even go further back than this, go to ASCII-based games or text-based games, but this is about as far back as I can take this genre comfortably. Some of you guys call this retro gaming. I call this my childhood.
I'd like an Atari 2600 system, please, and everything that goes with it. Everything? You sure want everything? I want everything.
In my neighborhood, you either owned the Atari or the Intellivision. Never both. We'd go to each other's houses and play on the other system a lot, and we'd trade tapes.
We called them tapes. I don't know why.
As far as graphics go, the Intellivision was better by far. It also had a full keypad, side buttons, multi-directional control disc. We had one and I loved it. It was my next door neighbor who had the Atari, and had a lot of games for it, including what I'm reviewing today, and that is Adventure. The game was released in 1979 by Atari, and it was about as complex as the console could handle. As a kid, I never really got the game, mostly because it had been traded so many times. The instruction booklet was long gone, and even if we had the instruction booklet, we were kids, we never would have read it anyway. I didn't know how groundbreaking the game truly was, because I really didn't have anything to compare it to. But looking back, it pretty much put out the foundation for all RPGs today. The storyline is that you play okay, so it's never really disclosed what you are supposed to be, but it must be important. But your job is to recover the enchanted chalice and return it to your castle. Along the way, you have to deal with 3 dragons named Yorgol, Grundle, and Rindle, who...
Okay, let me just address this. Yes, it looks like a duck. One thing about the old school days is that it required quite a bit of imagination, not just from the players, but also the programmers. We were kind of limited by the technology that we had available to us, so we kind of had to go with the flow. But the thing is, if you take off your glasses and squint at it kind of funny, you can kind of maybe see the tail right over here. Kinda.
Unique to the time was the inventory system. You run into an object to collect it, and you hit the button in order to drop it. You have to collect keys to open castle gates to get items that you're going to need, like the sword. This involves some tricky maneuvering sometimes, but it can be done. Once you have the sword, you can kill dragons with it by just touching them.
If only it were that easy.
There's also this black bat that flies around in the main levels and steals your stuff. Most annoying. Other than that, it's a pretty straightforward game. If a dragon touches you, you might get away, or it probably is going to eat you. And if that happens, you just hit reset and respawn. The downside is the dragons also respawn. You also get some other objects to help you along, one being the magnet, and you can use this to pull items along the map or pull stuck items out of walls. There's also a bridge you can use to get through parts of the game too, but my favorite object in the game is the Easter egg sprite.
Simple reason. Adventure was the first video game that actually had an Easter egg in it. The programmer knew that he was never going to get credit from Atari for his work, so he signed his work. In order to see this, you have to find that specific sprite, do a specific thing with it, and up pops the guy's name. Now how do you do that? I'm not going to tell you. It's a lot more fun when you got to figure it out for yourself.
The footage you're seeing me play here is from an online emulator, and it's not 100% the original, but it's enough to give you the right idea. This is the beginner level, and it can probably be beaten in a matter of minutes by modern game players. The higher levels include the bridge, the bat, and the Easter egg, of course. The game was insanely popular at the time, selling over 1 million cartridges. It also spawned sequels in spirit in 1982, which included much-needed storyline and detail. In fact, every RPG that has come since has improved on this basic formula, with better graphics, larger inventory, and a more immersive world. One thing I'm happy to have seen go in modern games is the scale. I mean, come on, you're wielding a weapon twice your size and fighting monsters 5 times your size. I mean, modern RPGs would never have this mechanic.
Oh.
By 1982, Intellivision had introduced Advanced Dungeons & Dragons for its console, and you can see the leaps and bounds in technology here, like you actually look like a person and not just a pixel. But the core gameplay still stands. Most of these old RPGs were only limited by the technology of what they could and could not do.
By modern RPG standards, Skyrim, this is not, but the core components are there. Go out into the world, save the kingdom, and the rest is pretty much just window dressing after that. But that being said, I still did enjoy this little retro romp, but it doesn't make me want to go out and go buy an Atari 2600 just to play all the old school games. Sometimes it's not bad to leave the past in the past, but at least know where you've been to understand where you're going. Or, to put it more simply, what's past is prologue.
Hey, Tiger?
Yeah, what up?
So, this is for that contest thing, right?
Well, yeah, it is. Why?
So I saw you got the apple, the Shakespeare quote, and the Spinal Tap requirements in there. What about the subliminal drink ad? I didn't see that.
Look, if they could read it, then it wouldn't be very subliminal, would it?
Oh, I guess not.